There is a certain irony in watching a country obsessed with abundance suddenly run out of something fundamental. Silver, for example, the one commodity that's supposed to be everywhere. But this week I watched the news of silver vaults running dry in New York and London, and I didn't feel shock, I felt a quiet recognition. This isn't a story about metal, shiny as it might be. It's a story about who's prepared for the world that's coming next. You're about to see why the biggest silver crisis in half a century is hammering the United States, but also opening new doors for Canada and maybe for Europe too. When everyone else is panicking, sometimes it pays to be the overlooked neighbor. We'll look at how this crisis unfolded, why the US finds itself caught flat-footed, and why Canada for once could actually profit from the chaos. And if you're wondering if this is just another commodities bubble, stick around. This time, I think the math is a bit different. If you lived through the gold and silver booms, or just watched the GameStop saga in real time, what does the silver panic make you feel? Excitement, fear, or just exhaustion? Let me know in the comments below, especially if you're Canadian. Would you rather see Canada benefit from this, or does it just feel like another case of someone else's crisis spilling across the borders? Just a quick personal note, my new book, Awake, The Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Soft Lies, is finally out in the world now. It's more than just a guide to thinking more clearly. It's about finding calm and clarity in a world that keeps getting louder. If you've ever felt like I do, worn down by the noise and knee-jerk opinions and want practical ways to think things through, especially under pressure, I think you'll find it valuable. Or if you know somebody who could use that kind of support right now, it might actually make a thoughtful Christmas gift. There's also a 24-minute companion podcast that walks through the key ideas, plus a launch video and a special discount for subscribers, all linked down below. And one more thing, maybe you didn't know, but I'm a computer scientist and I have a PhD in the field. I'm working on a new course all about AI fluency, essentially making sense of the technology that's shaping the next decade. If you're interested in this space and want to help guide what I build, I'd love to have your input. There's a quick 8-question survey, just a couple of minutes to fill out, and your thoughts will directly influence the content that I build next. The links to everything are below. It would mean so much to hear from you. Thank you for listening, but now let's get back into it. Let's set the scene. Silver hits $62 per ounce. Social media is on fire with $100 predictions. But beneath the noise, the old American pattern is playing out. A resource boom, a stampede for quick profit, and lurking just behind it all, a quiet panic that somebody else somewhere might hold the cards this time. This isn't the first time silver mania swept America. In the 1980s, the Hunt brothers nearly cornered the market, then lost billions in a spectacular crash. In 2011, post-crisis inflation fears sent silver soaring, then collapsing. In 2021, Reddit tried to squeeze the market, all drama, no substance. But here's where it gets interesting, that in all those stories, Canada was just a supplier, a backdrop. The mines, the experts, the hewers of wood and drawers of water. Canada sent its silver south, took its place, and tried to survive the fallout when American speculation went wrong. But Canada's relationship with resources is different, almost existential. Commodities aren't just business, they're part of national psychology. Every silver boom or bust, every oil shock leaves a mark. And if you talk to people in Thunder Bay or Val-d'Or, you'll hear the stories as well. Booms that built whole towns, busts that left them hollowed out. It's why Canadian policymakers now move with a kind of nervous caution, always looking over their shoulders for the next cycle. This time the caution might actually pay off. Part of thinking clearly is sitting with the discomfort of not having a clean answer. Now in 2025, the crisis is real. The vaults in New York and London aren't just low, they're being airlifted full of silver from Shanghai because the supply chain itself is seizing up. Demand isn't speculative, it's industrial. Solar panels, electric vehicles, AI data centers. The US, for all of its financial muscle, is finding out that money can't conjure metal out of thin air. Kind of like those scenes from Harry Potter when they made a cat out of nothing. Right now, the US media is running split screens, Wall Street analysts making wild price calls, well maybe not today because it's a Saturday, at least when I'm filming it, and American manufacturers are quietly calling Ottawa as well. It's almost comic how little leverage the world superpower has when the asset in question is physically dug from the ground and not conjured in a spreadsheet. Canada is not immune to chaos, but this time it holds a trump card. Hint, hint. Silver is still mined in Ontario and Quebec, not in overwhelming quantities, but enough to matter. Canadian reserves, built up by years of underinvestment and regulatory wrangling, suddenly look like a strategic advantage. Again, more interesting is how the tone has changed too. Canadian miners, when forced to accept US terms, are now fielding offers from Europe, Japan, South Korea. The US can't just dictate price anymore, it actually has to negotiate. Even the quiet bureaucracy in Ottawa has realized strategic patience is finally paying off. And this shift isn't only about economics, but about power. For decades, Canadians have watched their resources flow south at cut-rate prices, jobs sometimes following them as well. But now the same resources are essential to the world's clean energy transition, and the terms can be different as well. That is leverage, it's not just supply. There is a reason this feels confusing as well, because it's designed that way. Commodity markets are not about drama, they're about who can hold out longest when the music stops. A lot of people miss this, I think. The US built its post-war economy on two assumptions: infinite resource flows, as if that's a real thing, and total control over global finance, perhaps even more magical than the first one. In the silver market of 2025, both of these are slipping away. First, the US isn't a top 5 silver producer anymore. The mines that once dotted Nevada and Idaho are now a fraction of what they were. Most US silver now comes from recycling or imports. And as global demand for industrial silver explodes, driven by the green transition, America now finds itself fighting for supply it doesn't actually control. Second, the EU, and to a lesser extent Canada, spent the past decade actually building critical mineral strategies. The EU recognized early that reliance on foreign metals, especially from adversaries, was a strategic liability, so they stockpiled quite a bit, diversified suppliers, and invested in recycling tech. Canada, seeing the world shift, started prioritizing not just production, but domestic retention and value-added processing. Consider Germany's investment in battery recycling, or France's deals with Quebec for clean silver certified with low carbon standards. Europe's entire Green Deal was in part an industrial minerals policy by stealth. So when the US went all in on the Inflation Reduction Act recently and tried to reshore manufacturing, it forgot one thing: that you cannot reshore what you don't control. Canada, meanwhile, started passing net benefit reviews for mining takeovers and funneling government support to downstream industries. Ontario's new battery corridors is not just about jobs, it's about keeping critical minerals in the nation's orbit, not letting them slip south, or at least not without a fight. And behind all of this are the First Nation communities, right? Often left out in the past booms, now demanding and receiving equity stakes and environmental guarantees in new mines. The game is changing at every level. So as the US now scrambles to secure emergency supply, lobbying allies, waving the national security flag, we've seen that, we even have another video about that, Canada is actually fielding calls, negotiating contracts, and weighing who gets access and at what price. For once, hewers of wood and drawers of water is an advantage, not a curse. It's easy to have an opinion here, right? But it's much harder to hold the facts without letting them drown in emotion. But let's zoom out just for a second. If America is panicking and Canada and Europe are quietly gaining ground, what's actually happening in the rest of the world? Because this is not just a North Atlantic drama. This is actually a global market in the middle of a seismic shift. Let's start with China, because honestly, how can we not, right? China's entire economic playbook is about spotting leverage before anyone else sees it. So when the vaults in London started scraping the bottom and traders in New York were left making frantic phone calls, it wasn't the Americans or the Europeans who stepped in to rescue the system. It was China, and not as a favor, but as a power move. Picture this: Chinese cargo planes loaded with hundreds of tons of silver, taking off from Shanghai, crossing continents, landing in London like airdrops in a besieged city, except instead of food or medicine, it's bullion, and the price tag isn't just high, it's non-negotiable. If you want the metal, you take it at a price, and our timing. There's something deeply symbolic about that, right? For decades, the West set the rules of commodity trade, and now the world's most critical raw minerals are getting priced out of Beijing and not Wall Street. And for all the recent talk in America about reshoring and building resilient supply chains, the reality is less patriotic and more complicated. There are no clean breakaways in this new order, only new dependencies, some more uncomfortable than the others. Silver is just the latest chapter in a much bigger story, my friends. Who gets to decide the terms when the basics run short? But it's not just the superpowers who are getting a say. Look at Mexico, Peru, Chile, countries that have always been rich in resources but historically short on bargaining power. And for years, they watched their silver shipped abroad, priced in somebody else's currency, with profits trickling back in only ex post. But now, suddenly, Canadian negotiators are securing better prices, so why shouldn't Peru demand the same? If Ottawa can say take it or leave it, so can Mexico City, and trust me, they are. There's a ripple effect here, right? Even countries outside the traditional commodity club are watching this unfold and taking notes. Indonesia with nickel, Congo with cobalt, Kazakhstan with uranium. Everyone is realizing that the old model, where raw minerals just flow towards the financial centers, no longer works when the physical stuff itself is running out. So what does all of this mean? The question isn't whether this is good or bad for any one country. It's more fundamental than that, I think. It's about how the rules of engagement, who sets them, who benefits, who adapts first, are being rewritten in real time. The usual playbooks don't work anymore. Every government, every company, every investor is having to ask, what if the next shortage is the one we're not prepared for? That's why these moments matter, not because of the headlines or the hype, but because the ground is shifting under everyone's feet and no one's exactly sure where the new fault lines will settle. But with power comes risk, of course. If silver prices spike too high, industrial buyers will just simply go elsewhere or delay projects, as happened in the lithium crash last year. Canadian producers could find themselves caught between world price and domestic needs, with governments pressured to keep metal at home for national industries. This is where reality gets messy, my friends, and where most narratives choose a side. But a disciplined mind pauses here, not to doubt everything, but we have to doubt a little. Markets don't move in straight lines, and no advantage lasts forever. The US could still retaliate using subsidies or regulatory muscle to claw back some control. The Fed's rate cut might turbocharge commodities for a few more months, but another shock, a deep recession, another supply chain freeze could turn today's crisis into tomorrow's glut. For Canada, the risk is believing its own hype. Commodity booms are addictive, and history is littered with resource economies that mistook temporary leverage for permanent power. If Canada bets too hard on silver or ignores the cost to Indigenous communities and local ecosystems, the backlash could be swift. And for ordinary people, volatility means jobs gained, jobs lost, prices rising, then falling. The headlines might read, Canada wins the silver rush, but the real winners are those who can adapt fastest, not those who make the most noise. What you believe here often says more about your priors than about the actual evidence. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I'd love it if you subscribe. The House of L is a community of thoughtful, curious people, and you're very welcome here. So, is this the boy who cried wolf, or is the wolf finally here? The American story is one of abundance and improvisation until suddenly it isn't. The Canadian story is quieter, more cautious, but sometimes that's the only thing that keeps you standing when the wind shifts. The truth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits for the noise to die down. If you're watching this from Canada, ask yourself, are you comfortable being a winner in someone else's crisis? If you're in the US, maybe the lesson is that control over resources isn't permanent, it's rented, not owned. And for everyone else, maybe this is just a reminder that the commodity stories of the 21st century won't be driven by hype, but by the hard limits of what the earth can actually supply. Don't just ask what's true. Ask why this version of the truth is being told now. Because the wolf at the door doesn't care about your narrative. He only cares about who's got the key. If you found this video interesting, you might want to check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and don't let the wolf eat. Well, maybe sometimes.